Welcome to Webinar Wednesday. I'm Brittany. I'm the Senior Training Manager here at CADCA, and we are so excited to have you with us today and to have Kim Linkle with us talking about sector collaboration. Just a quick few announcements before we get started. Make sure to use the question and answer box, which we'll be monitoring throughout the entire webinar, to put your questions in, and we'll get to them throughout the webinar at the end of the session. And then we'll also take some of them and we'll move them into the CADCA community. So immediately following this, Kim will be in our CADCA community doing some more Q&A, having conversations with you about sector collaboration. So please make sure to join us there immediately after. The CADCA community is one of our great member benefits. If you're not currently a CADCA member, you know, there are so many benefits to being a member. We will reach out to you specifically about any advocacy work or, you know, advocacy alerts, the CADCA community, where you can really just talk and interact with coalition members across the country, and so many other great resources that are available on the community. If you're interested in becoming a member, you can reach out to Lauren Blackwell, who's our membership associate, and I will put their information in the chat box so you can reach out to her later. Additionally, don't forget to click all panelists and attendees when sharing in the chat box so that everyone can see what you're sharing. The recording of this webinar, along with the resources and the PowerPoint, will be available following. It'll go up on our website in a couple of days. You'll also receive a follow-up email with an evaluation link so that you can let us know what other kind of webinars you want to see, and your general thoughts about how today went. Additionally, we do have a few other webinars coming up. We're very excited to have Colbert Prosper doing a webinar on race and injustice on May 19th. And Jaria Martin will be doing one on June 16th for us, titled Wedding of the Century, the Prevention, Treatment, and Recovery Throuple. And at the end of May, we do have an upcoming one with our Geographic Health Equity Alliance partner to be talking about tobacco work. So make sure to look out for the registration links for those. But I think that is everything. And Kim, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Brittany. Hi, everyone. And as Brittany said, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. I am very excited to have so many people on, and I saw a lot of familiar names scrolling through and saying hi. So that's so exciting. And really just glad to be here to be able to share some of my knowledge about sector collaboration and how it drives community change. So I'm going to go ahead and get started, and we will have time to do some sharing in the chat box. And then, as Brittany mentioned, if you have a question, please put that in the Q&A box, and then I will stop from time to time and make sure I am answering any and all of your questions. So we're going to go ahead and get started with that. So the objectives for today's webinar is to identify specific community members and sector representatives within your community that you should reach out to that will assist in driving community change. Also, to build engagement within, how to build engagement within community members from a variety of sectors to address a specific strategy, and then how to develop long-term relationships with individuals and groups throughout the community to ensure there is a high level of respect, mutual respect. So let's start with what is collaboration. Collaboration is the process that makes it possible to reach a goal that cannot be achieved by one person or agency alone. This implies a need for negotiation and agreement about the goal and strategies. Partners work together by sharing expertise, resources, and responsibility for achieving the set goal. This is so important, and when I came across this explanation of collaboration, it is exactly what we as coalitions do each and every day. We work together to really drive our community change over time, and we know that one person or one entity within our coalition cannot do it alone. So we need to come together and work together as a unit. So as we work collaboratively, there are 6 crucial skills that we want to make sure that we are looking at and ensuring that we are working as part of the entire program. That is open-mindedness, communication, organization, long-term thinking, adaptability, and debate. I'm going to go into each of these a little bit more at this time. So first, open-mindedness. Being open-minded is very important when you come to the table to collaborate. We need to make sure that even though we are bringing our own ideas and thoughts, that those others that are coming to the table as well are able to share their thoughts and listen to others. We know that many of the people coming to the table during our coalition meetings, during committee meetings, during strategy or planning meetings have different areas of expertise and different perspectives of what is going on in the community. And so we need to really strive to be able to listen and hear each of those ideas and thoughts without, coming to the table and thinking, you know what, I have the best thought ever and I am going to stick with that thought, and that is the best solution to this problem. In this environment, when we are being open-minded, the curious people are going to thrive. They're going to keep asking questions. They're going to want to know more about everyone's ideas and thoughts. And we're going to have that other group that may be more resistant because, they have their idea, they know how it's worked in the past, or they have, maybe worked in another community where this specific strategy was addressed this way. And so they, may be more resistant to all of those ideas and that sharing. We want to really create a climate with being open-minded, and really make sure that we are staying on topic, that we are sharing everyone's ideas and thoughts. And then before we eliminate anyone's ideas, to really listen to everyone and hear everyone out. And so by getting so many ideas on the table, many times it may be bringing two of those ideas together to really determine what that solution will ultimately be. I loved this quote by Frank Zappa that says, "A mind is like a parachute. It doesn't work if it's not open." So I just thought that was a really good way of putting it. We have to be open-minded and willing to listen to others and hear others' ideas as we are working collaboratively. Second important strategy to collaboration is communication. And again, many of us already work in the coalition field or we're coalition members. And so, just being clear and thoughtful through that communication and making sure that, if you have an upcoming meeting, if something is going on within the coalition, that you are sharing that as a coalition leader, and making sure that everyone is on the same page and knows what is going on. Communication is so important both internally and externally. Obviously, I just mentioned the external, making sure the meeting notices go out, making sure, you're being responsive if people have questions about something that you're working on within the coalition, but also that internal communication is very vital. As we know, there are many types of communicators, and some are very verbal. And so a traditional meeting setting work perfect for them and is the perfect venue for them to be able to share their ideas and provide feedback, where others may be not as willing to share that communication verbally. And so I always encourage coalitions to really think about those maybe not so talkative, or maybe those people that are more internal thinkers and need some time to process. So as you're working on developing a solution for a strategy, maybe, when we can be in person, put the big pieces of paper around the room for people to share their ideas and thoughts without necessarily having to speak verbally and share them. I do think that in this virtual world that we've been living in for over a year now, that has actually opened up some additional avenues of communication. You know, via Zoom, you can use the chat feature, or there's annotations we can use. So there's other ways that people can share their thoughts and opinions and ideas without always having to verbalize them. If you do notice while you're working with a group during a meeting that maybe someone is challenged as to how they will are able to share an idea or a thought, and you can see that they're not able to clearly explain, their thoughts, I encourage you to either during a break or on the side after the meeting, just pull them aside and, talk with them further about that so that you can clearly understand what, they were, what point that they were wanting to explain, and so that you can maybe become their voice a little bit more and be able to clarify what, their idea or their thought was. The third strategy is organization. And again, this just goes with being organized to be able to delegate that workload. I know as coalition staff, many times we take on a lot of the workload, and we want to really work on spreading that workload out, giving responsibilities to the coalition members and allowing them to then do their tasks. Make sure, though, that as the leader of the strategy or the implementation program that you're working on, that there is a lead person that can do those check-ins. Many times that may be the coalition staff, but also many times that may not be the coalition staff. So maybe you have a chair of a committee that's leading a project or an initiative. Have that person make sure that they're coordinating and just having those check-ins to see how things are going. I know something that I've seen several coalitions do, and I really like this idea, is at the bottom of their coalition agenda or their committee meeting agenda, they will actually have a task list. And so it will say who was responsible to do what from the last meeting. So then that is obviously one way to check in to say, hey, Kim, you said you were going to contact X, Y, and Z by this next meeting. Were you able to do that? So you could, you can report on that, obviously, as well as it's a reminder, because when the reminder goes out about the meeting, those notes are also included so that then you see, oh, I was supposed to, make this phone call, or I was supposed to make this connection, and I haven't been able to do that yet. So I need to do that before our, meeting that's coming up. Then we want to be long-term thinkers. We want to make sure that we are really looking at that end goal and not necessarily the small steps to get there, because many times those will be tweaked, and we'll talk about that a little bit with adaptability. But we want to make sure that we are looking at that end goal, and that everyone that is coming to the table is really bought into that end goal and what we want to ultimately achieve. Whether we are looking at passing a policy, whether we are looking at doing a media campaign, no matter what what we're working on at the time, making sure everyone is on the same page and really working to strive for that end goal. We also want to make sure that we're able to explain the why of the work. As we all know, coalition members come and go. We have staff changes, we have, new people that move into our community that want to get involved. So we want to be able to explain that why with our coalition members so that everyone can share that. So it doesn't always come back to that one point person, but so everyone around the table can explain that why. Fifth one is adaptability. And I feel that probably everyone on this call has learned more about adaptability over the last year than maybe prior, your entire lifetime prior to last year. We all know as we do coalition work, that many times our plans don't go as planned. We may say, oh, we're going to do this, and then this. And sometimes it does not happen in that order, or something comes up that, just puts a tweak in our plan. And so we have to go back and, look at that differently. We sometimes have priorities shift, or there's obstacles and delays in the progress and moving forward. It's easy for us overall, or as an individual, just to say, you know what, just to throw our hands up and just be done. And, in coalition work, though, we can't do that because it's not just us. We don't get to say, well, we're not going to do that. So we need to pull together and really learn how to adapt and make those initiatives happen and the strategies be able to move forward. I think it's important also, if you are leading that group, to really lead by example, even when things maybe do go haywire, or they're not going in the order that we think they are, or they're not moving in the as quickly as we think they should. Really lead by example and be willing to make those shifts and to be able to adapt, because we know that, things happen. People change jobs, life happens. And so we need to be really able to stay calm and keep focused as we work through that. As I mentioned before, obviously adaptability has been vital to our work over the last year. Who would have thought the beginning of March of 2020, we would be doing most, if not 100% of our work virtually for the next, we're on 13 months now, and who knows how much longer, we will be in this virtual space. But coalitions did a great job of being adaptable and figuring out how we could still meet, how we could still work with the youth, how we could stay involved in the community and still continue to drive the work forward. Now, in speaking with many coalition leaders across the nation, I know that, things changed. Obviously, we may not have been able to be as quick to get a project done that we were working on, or we may have had to shift our focus to another program, or figure out how we are going to do a virtual meeting. And so being adaptable over the last year has really been vital to the work of almost every career and industry in America. But even as coalitions, because we are so network focused, we are so, out in the community connecting with people, that it was a huge challenge for coalitions across the board. And I feel like we, did a great job of making that pivot and taking everything to the virtual world. And then finally, the debate. Just make sure that your coalition members are willing and to have those hard discussions, but keep them factual. Make sure everyone, again, is being heard and no one is getting heated, but make sure that everyone is able to share their thoughts or ideas. Make sure that they're able to share their concerns or why this may not work. And so I just, again, encourage us to remember these 6 strategies as we look at collaboration and talk more specifically about who to bring to the table and how to work as a group. Brittany, as I go to the next slide, do we have any questions?
No, there's just been people concurring in the chat box about, how helpful Zoom has been, private chats and things like that. So.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. So as we move into the next section, someone said this just the other day to me, and it really stuck. So I wanted to make sure that I added this into the slide deck. Local people solve local problems. And I think it is so important, especially looking at these 6 areas that we really need to make sure that we are mindful of when we are coming together. And it is so true. The more local your coalition is, the more focused it is. You really are able to bring those local people to the table because they want to create the healthiest, safest community that they typically live, work, and dine out in, entertain in. And so by making the coalition localized, it really drives people to really want to do something about the issues, because it again affects them personally, their families, their friends. So I loved when the person shared this with me, because I thought, you know what, it's so true. Something happening in another state or another community may not mean as much to me if it's not necessarily happening here in my community, versus if it is in my community where I am, entrenched in everything that goes on. I'm definitely going to want to be at the table and helping to solve those problems. So who should be at the table? I believe that anyone who has an invested interest in the work needs to be at the table. We obviously need, a variety of people. However, their level of involvement may look different. You may have someone that is at the table that says straight up, I am interested in the work your coalition is doing. However, I cannot meet at 11 a.m. on the first Monday of the month. But I would love to, continue to get the minutes, continue to have any communication that you send out so that I know what is going on within the coalition, but I just can't make that next level of commitment. Additionally, some people may live in the community but work outside of the community, so that may impact if their ability to be invested and attend certain meetings. I really feel like your community drives the who. So depending what is available in your community, depending what the resources are in your community, that's really going to drive who should be at your table. You as a community leader or as a coalition meeting or member know who is in your community, and therefore who is able to and willing to come step up to the plate and make some of those changes that we ultimately need to see in our communities. Obviously, we want to aim for the movers and shakers, those big decision makers in all sectors. But again, we really need the doers as well, because we know that when we are taking action and driving that community change, if we have everyone around the table simply making the decisions, we're not going to have those people that are actually there to really do the work. And so in addition to the movers and shakers, we want to also make sure that we have the doers at the table. I always say there are 4 key groups that we definitely want to have involved. The sectors of these groups sometimes vary, but we want to make sure that we do have stakeholders. These are those that are most affected by the work. So ultimately, with coalition work, many times the stakeholders are the general community, because typically, especially if we're working with environmental strategies, we are truly impacting everyone in that community. And then we also want to make sure that we're looking at stakeholders who will be impacted by the change. So if you are looking at a school policy, you want to make sure that there are stakeholders from the school involved, and that, as a coalition, you're not saying, you know what, we feel like we need to change this because we have seen this information or we are hearing this. We really need to involve the stakeholders that would need to be involved and can really be in that space. Also, the community opinion leaders. These are your influential leaders. Many times it's the faith-based community or business leaders. They're highly credible in your community. They're respected and they're widely known throughout the community. And these leaders can absolutely make your coalition and help drive your coalition forward, because they're able to share the information wide and far because of their connections. I know locally we work a lot with our business community, and it is so vital to have that community at the table, because although they may not be at every monthly meeting, they are able to send out information when we're hosting trainings or when we have activities going on or events. Here next week, we have we're hosting a drug take back event. So many of our large businesses will send that out to their employees through their intranet. Having them at the table and willing to do that is huge, because you're sharing that information about what is going on within the coalition without you individually as a community leader or as a coalition leader or as a coalition member having to do that work. Another group obviously is the policymakers. I encourage groups to have local policymakers at the table monthly, if at all possible. And then even the state and federally, many times your legislatures will have offices in your region or in your area. So you may not have the elected official at the table, but I encourage you to at least meet with their staff, or at least be sending them information as to what the coalition is doing. So as policymakers are looking to shift, make shifts in policies, to even look at funding streams and things like that, that you have that connection already made. And so a simple call to them, or a time to set up a meeting, is a lot more easy at that point than really trying to work from the beginning and just becoming acquainted with them when you have a need. And then obviously the media is another area that you want to have on your side. Maybe they aren't necessarily at the coalition table, but they're definitely, connected and willing, again, to share your information and get the word out about the coalition when needed. Obviously, many of you on here are funded or have been funded previously by the Drug Free Communities Fund. And there are 12 sectors that obviously we need to have at the table or involved in the coalition at some point. And I know many times I hear that parents are so hard to reach. And so we have to be creative and really think, how can we get to the parents? Really thinking outside the box. I always encourage people to go to them. So find where parents are. One way that the community I work with locally has done that, and I just mentioned it, is through our businesses. Obviously, many of the workers at our local businesses are parents. So we have been able to work through our business sector to actually get some parents involved and interested in the work we're doing. The schools are another area that you can really reach many parents and really try to bring them on board. Some communities have parent groups. I know locally we have started a mom to mom group that is just taking off at a whole nother level. And so I have, continued to stay connected with them and work to try to bring someone from that group on board. Other areas that, many times are very challenging to get on board is some communities have challenges with schools. I feel like more and more when I'm talking to coalitions that schools aren't as challenging anymore, which is a good thing. However, again, with the pandemic and with COVID-19 hitting last year and schools having to take a major pivot in how they were providing education, how they weren't even in school. So all of a sudden, not only they as administrators had to figure out what that was going to look like, you had educators figuring out what that was going to look like and did look like for several months. Your students, all of a sudden, they were trying to do their schoolwork virtually. I know some still are. And then obviously the parents of the students were determining, oh my gosh, now we have our students at home. How do we make all of this work? So although schools, I feel, have been traditionally a better more involved sector than I was seeing early on in my prevention work. I still think that there are some challenges. And again, I encourage people to not just have that one go-to at a school corporation or a school district. And the reason I say that is because if that one person were to leave, where does that leave your coalition, and how connected is your coalition with the the school or any other sector for that matter? And so I know when our coalition started, one thing that we did is we do an annual presentation to the school board. Just, we provide our data, we provide any initiatives that we've been able to do in the schools, and really just share that information with the school board so that we could also engage those members as well as the superintendent, who we're very fortunate to have on our executive committee. And the prior superintendent was actually one of the founding members of our coalition several years ago. And I'm going to say probably 3 or 4 years. I can't remember exactly how long ago it has been. But when he announced he was leaving, at first it is very anxiety driven, because I was like, oh my gosh, are we going to be able to continue this amazing relationship we've had with the schools? Because we were so connected to the superintendent. However, the new superintendent, I always say, is just as amazing, if not more amazing. But I think that it was helped because we were connected with other groups and other entities within the school. Obviously, as I mentioned, we did a presentation annually to the school board. We also do some programs in the schools in different grades, so we have those connections with the teachers. So I think it's really important to think widely about who to bring at the table, and to really use your knowledge of who those key players may be at within one of the sectors. And it may not be who you typically would think of, but really knowing your community and who can really be the driving forces. So I'm just going to ask you now, if you don't mind, in the chat box, if you would just put, if any of you have done a great job, or your coalitions, of really looking kind of outside the box, bringing people that to the table that you may have not thought of in the past, or other coalitions may not have at the table, but it may be an option. So I just ask that you take a few seconds and maybe just brainstorm to yourself, and then put them in the chat so that we can share those with others that are on here, as to some ideas of other people that we can bring to the table besides those that we talked about. Mandy says recovery community, the LGBTQIA plus organizations, people from neighborhood associations, students who are on our school board. I really like that, Steph. Local community morning radio personality, which is great because, again, by having that morning person from the radio on there, that gives you an opportunity to then, obviously go on the morning show and share things that are going on within the community and within your coalition. I see Parks and Rec, Poison Control Center. That's a great idea. I had not even thought about having the Poison Control Center on the coalition. Mentioned in another webinar to inquire with the local district attorney. And Carrie said that she made contact yesterday, so they are going to be talking. That is awesome. The Lions Club, Jackie mentions, and yes, that is, the civic organizations are vital to the work that we do as coalitions. I know locally our Kiwanis are very strong. I know in other communities, either the Lions may be strong, or the Rotary Club, the Elks Club. So definitely having representation from those different clubs that are within your community really can bring a new, fresh look to your coalition, and to just fresh ideas. Undercover narcotics officers, There's a youth diversion program I just found out about, and I'm in the process of getting youth representation from that to be on their coalition. Lori mentioned, Gwen mentioned that they're in the midst of recruiting staff who work with grants within the schools to help at-risk youth. That's awesome. The DEA office, veterans groups, non-traditional partners, faith-based, local teachers and vocational schools, and vocational school is a huge partner. I know we unfortunately don't have one right here in the community in which I live, but in a neighboring community, they have a vocational school, and one of their areas that the youth can focus on is restaurant management. And so they actually will provide meals for coalitions and nonprofits that are doing trainings. You can either go to them and they have an area that you can do the training in and they provide the meal there, or they will do boxed lunches and things like that at a very, very reasonable rate. So vocational schools is definitely a great partner to bring to the table. Religious groups beyond Christian churches, absolutely, make sure you know your community and which religious groups are within your community and where we really need to be focused and determined to, get someone initially, hopefully, a representative, but then to be able to really do that work within that or your community. Foster and group homes, that is also an amazing idea towards zero death law enforcement, colleges and universities, fire departments, the mental health sector, juvenile court staff, parks and rec, pharmacists, local cultural groups. Jessica mentioned there's an illegal dumping task force. That's very interesting. But again, if that's in your community and you guys can engage them and figure out a way to keep them at the table and, determine what they can provide and what they have to offer, as well as what you have to offer and give. The YMCA and the Boys and Girls Club, transportation services. Megan mentioned the transportation services, and that also is important. I know so many coalitions are in rural communities, and so that is definitely, a need, because in order to do programs and events, many times we need to work with those transportation agencies and groups that provide transportation so that we can get participants to and from. So that is absolutely important. Fraternities and sororities. So again, if you're in a college or a university town working with the sororities, Asian Community Center, behavioral health care, higher education, homeschool groups, Pam mentions, and that is definitely a group that many communities probably have, and you may not even be aware of it. Many homeschool groups are in each community, and I wasn't even aware like that. They come together. Many times they will do some of their studies together, such as maybe physical education or arts or things like that. And so they are very many times a very organized group within your community. I know that we were able to reach out to ours through our local library because they meet there once a month or once every other month. So I was able to connect through the library to our homeschool group. But again, it's a sector of our youth that we don't reach unless we are working with that homeschool group. So I loved that idea, Pam. Insurance companies, absolutely. Dentistry, college and pharmacy departments at universities. I always also encourage coalitions as they're thinking about evaluation, to look at your universities and see if there's graduate assistance or there's, college classes that are needing hours or a project. I know that several coalitions use college students to do like media campaigns and to put videos and PSAs together. So these are all great. 4-H, absolutely. Your realtors, Chamber of Commerce, youth employment program, young parents program. And yeah, and that's when I mentioned the mom to moms group in our community, that's kind of the young parents group. And, it's a lot of young moms that, have just maybe had, maybe they have toddlers or even younger. And so they come together to just really share their experiences. But by getting involved in that, that enables us to also, work and get and share the information of our coalition out. Department of Transportation, I see, early childhood education, WIC, young professionals, charter schools, and Julie, thanks for that reminder. I actually just had a conversation with a coalition this morning, and they were talking about that they have 2 school districts in their service region, and they said, and we also work with our charter schools. And I want to remind everyone how important it is, just like working with the homeschool students, to make sure you are reaching out to those charter schools or those private schools. I know locally, we make sure that every opportunity we give to our public school students, we also give to our private school students. Not always, are the private schools or the public schools on board with maybe one of the initiatives or the programs that we want to offer, and that's okay, as long as we are making sure we make that offer and have that connection. When we initially started our coalition, we did not have our private schools, the students within our private schools taking our annual youth survey. So as we started working more and looking more at the data, we wanted to make sure that they were being counted and that we were also able to look at, what they were reporting, because we weren't getting a true snapshot of our entire community. And so since then, we have been able to work with them, and now all school buildings 7 through 12 do take the community or the youth survey when we administer it. And so now we feel like we get a true picture of our community and what the youth are reporting there. So yeah, so there are tons, senior centers, AA facilitators, Black maternal health groups. There are tons of ideas. So absolutely, thank you everyone for sharing those ideas, because it is very important for us to share our ideas. And like I said, there may not be something in my community that's in someone else's community. And so definitely want to make sure that, if you have any kind of outside the box thinking, definitely go ahead and continue to put those in the chat box so that you can share and give ideas to others. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about circles of involvement. And what I came across this not too long ago. Partners in Health actually is, if you Google Partners in Health, they actually have this information there, even in some other graphs. But I wanted to just briefly touch on this, because I think it's so important for us to remember that people and organizations and agencies, even businesses, may want to be involved in different levels. So what the circles of involvement really is about is where everyone is within your coalition. And you can even do this for specific strategies. So you have the core circle, which is that very inner circle, and then the circle around that would be your circle of engagement. And then the layering out would be the circle of champions, the circle of information and awareness, and then finally your circle of possibility. And so looking a little bit at each of the circles. So again, I mentioned the core circle, and that is obviously your coalition staff. If you have coalition leadership team, an executive committee, someone that may be coming in and doing facilitation for your coalition, if you're working on strategic planning or something like that. But really that core circle is that core team that works day in and day out to move the mission of your coalition forward. Next circle out would be that circle of engagement. So again, your executive team or your leadership team may be in that inner circle, but they also may be in this circle of engagement. They're truly engaged in the work. They need to be committed to the plan. They're maybe not involved with that everyday activity, but they're in the know. And if someone was to ask them about your coalition or your group and what strategies you were working on, or maybe where you sit on this topic, or this specific piece of information, they would be able to share that. They're also your cheerleaders, and they need to be informed of that big picture again so that they can share that information out. Circle of champions is then that third ring out. They help with specific tasks. So these sometimes can be seen more as the doers. They are the people that you may reach out to and say, hey, we have this event coming up, or we have this training coming up. Would you be willing to do A, B, and C? And, they will take on that task. They will, manage that task when needed and, follow through with that. Again, they're not involved necessarily in every piece of the plan, and they may not even be involved in all the pieces of the coalition. They may be involved only when you are working with the business community, or they may only be involved if you're working on a policy at the school or a local, policy within your city government or county government. And so it's more of those champions that are, they are there when you need them and they're responsive, but they are not there maybe at that every day or every monthly meeting. And then looking on out that circle of information. So this is going to be your partners or your people who are more removed from the overall plan, but they do lend support. So maybe it is a business who says, you know what, we can't necessarily be involved in everything, but if you have a training, let us know and we'll provide a space. Or, we are willing to push this out to our employees, or whatever they are willing and able to do. So you want to keep them informed and you want to keep them aware of things going on so they can step up to the plate when an opportunity arises. And then finally, that circle of possibility. I am sure many coalitions discuss this on a regular basis because we know how important, it is to continue to strive to bring additional people to our table. So the circle of possibility would be that real big outside circle. And, those are the long shots or the wild cards. So maybe you have a large corporation that you want to get the CEO at the table, or you want to bring your state representative, one of your representatives or your senators to the table. And so those would be more of your long shots if they're not already at the table. Maybe they're not that natural partner. So, someone mentioned the transportation department. Absolutely. Maybe not that natural partner, but as you're working on strategies, that may be someone that, we want to build a relationship with, because as we're doing, I don't know, a road cleanup, or we want to put some additional signage up, that you're able to do that. And then they can also provide resources. So that would be another area to really look at, maybe who has either funding or resources, in-kind resources that they could contribute. And I encourage you as coalitions to sit down, either with your leadership team or even just a small group that may be interested, and really, draw the circle out and think about where your partners fall. Because again, it's not always about having everyone at the table every month. It's knowing that if you reach out to that partner or that person, that they're going to be at the table, or they're going to be willing to say yes when you need them to. So obviously, community change needs community involvement. And just as I walked through the circles of involvement, that can really help us see maybe who we need to have at the table that is not there now, or we need to have invested in this project or this strategy that is not either at the table or maybe not as engaged as we would like to see them. So definitely, making sure that the community overall is involved and able to help drive that change will move mountains when it comes to your coalition work, because the more people that we can have on our side, knowing what we are doing and how we are doing it, is just an enhancement to the work that we do. I'm going to take a pause and ask Brittany. Brittany, are there any questions at this time?
No, nothing yet.
Awesome. We're going to go on, and the next probably 10, 15 minutes, I'm going to just talk about some different ways to build long-term engagement. And then that will leave us about 15 minutes, and I'll open it up for any questions or even, any sharing that anyone wants to do at that time. So there are several bullet points that I have up here, and I just want to explain a little bit about each one. So building long-term engagement, I think, takes both us as coalition leaders, as coalition members. It takes our time and talent to engage them, but we also need the person that we're trying to bring onto the coalition to be willing to make that long-term engagement. Because if they're not able and willing, then really, we unfortunately, even though we want them at the table, we may need to look beyond that specific person or that specific agency. So I'm really big on encouraging coalitions to allow the data to drive the process. And I see a typo in that, and I apologize. I didn't put the word "to" in there. So really allowing that data to drive the work of the coalition, because many times we hear over and over again, well, how do you know that youth are drinking? How do you know this is important? How do we know this? And so, obviously many of us have our youth survey that we take annually or every other year. And so by having that information at our hands, we can show this is what's going on in our community. We additionally, do a community perception survey every year to really see what the parents are saying. So again, we have that data as we're working on different strategies. And as we wrote the drug-free community grant, we were able to say, this is the challenges in our community, and we know this because of the data that we have collected over time. We use law enforcement data, we use hospital data. So we look comprehensively at all data sets to really allow the data to drive the process. I was actually talking to a coalition this morning, and she had mentioned that, vaping right now is really high in their community. And so many people don't want to talk about alcohol and underage drinking. They just want to talk about that vaping because, it's here and now. It's kind of that new hot topic. And so it was interesting because I knew I was going to be talking about this afternoon, that it is so true. Many communities, even though when we look at the data, alcohol use among youth is higher than almost all other substances in all communities that I am aware of. Now, there may be, some communities that have higher usage in other substances, but ultimately alcohol use amongst youth is one of, if not the highest in almost all communities. And so it's interesting to see that and have those conversations with, even coalition members, because they hear about the vaping, they see the vaping, they want to know more about vaping all the time, but those alcohol conversations kind of get pushed aside because they don't see that as important or prevalent at this point. And so by having that data, we're able to really show this is what we should be doing and this is why. Again, we want to meet them where they are. And I say that because, and I know I've mentioned it a few other times during this conversation, is they may be very interested in the work you're doing, but they may not be able to make it to a meeting, or they may not be able to be part of a committee. So meet them where they are. And if they can't come to you, be willing to go to them. I know it's been a little more challenging over the last year to do that, but as things are starting to open up in some areas, I know I had a one-on-one meeting last week at our local coffee shop, just with one other person. He's new to the area. He's actually working with our local 4-H group. He wanted to learn more about the coalition. I was very excited, to have that conversation because he's going to come in and do some youth training for our youth component. And so it was a win-win conversation. But again, we can't be in person at our monthly meetings as of yet. So, figuring out how you can meet with them or have a phone conversation or hold a Zoom, one-on-one Zoom meeting with someone. So again, just meeting them where they are. And pay attention to the small things. I really try to do a good job being a coalition leader myself of, if I see someone's child or someone's grandchild or even them as a coalition member that they've done something, or maybe they've gotten a promotion, or their son or their daughter maybe got a scholarship that was announced in the media, just letting them know that I'm aware of that, and wow, I saw that Susie did this, or Joe did this. And because it's those little things and those little connections that really bring people together and really want to continue to do the work. And so I really do my best and encourage each of you to also, pay attention to the small things. And when you see, either, and it could be an organization, maybe an organization that's highly involved turned 10, or, that had their 25-year anniversary. Again, just, make them aware that you're aware and paying attention to the other items that they're involved with, and not just, wanting them to come to the coalition all the time. And, so it's kind of that give and take. Also sit on boards and attend other meetings. So I know that I sit on a few other boards here locally. I attend our countywide coalition meetings. Again, they may not be talking directly about something that we're doing here locally, but still, building those relationships, building that rapport. And then if there is an opportunity to work together, I already, have made contact and know those people sitting around that table. So it's a much easier win than having to start that when, there's a need.
Kim.
And then, yes, go ahead.
So somebody asked about getting copies of the surveys for law enforcement and the parent survey. And I wonder if you could talk just quickly about coalition development support around some of this.
Yes, absolutely. So as Brittany mentioned, my role as a CADCA trainer is mainly with the Coalition Development Support Team. And so if any of you have any questions, you can always send us an email at training@cadca.org, and we can help with any level of coalition development. So whether that's creating surveys, providing examples of surveys, whether that's, I know yesterday I was talking to a group about they're amending their bylaws, so they had some questions. So any level of coalition development we can assist with. So again, if you send an email to training@cadca.org, one of our team members will get back with you and be able to assist you and provide you those sample surveys and provide the information that you request. Thanks, Brittany. And then the other pieces that I encourage groups to think about for that long-term engagement is to really be present. Someone shared with me last week when I was on a call that she had attended a high school track meet, and she had seen several of the youth that she works with within their youth council, and she was able to go over to them afterwards and say, "Oh wow, you did a great job," or send them a text later saying, "Great job. I saw, you run the mile," or, whatever event they were doing. So just being present and being aware. Many times I say when I go to the grocery store, you think you're going to go and grab 10 or 20 items, and then I end up being there for an hour because someone stops me and has questions, about something that the coalition is working on, or how do I get involved, or I have a youth that may be interested in being on the youth council. How do they find out about that, or when are you doing recruitment for that? So always be willing to be present. And I always say that I have to be on 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, because you never know when a potential coalition member, is going to stop you and ask a question, or a potential funder, or a potential, partner. And so I just always encourage you to be present and be willing to talk about your coalition work at any time. There are some times when I am at the grocery store, I probably don't want to talk coalition work. I just really want to get, my list marked off and get back home. But, in the work we do, that, kind of out in the community, we just have to be willing to be present when, someone wants to talk about that. And then I always think also it's important to learn connections. So maybe as a, coalition chair or a coalition staff member, you may not have the connection to someone in the community that you want to bring onto the table, but who may have that connection. And I actually got this idea several years ago at a National Coalition Academy that I attended. Someone shared this, and we have been doing this in our community since, and I loved it. Obviously, there are 12 sectors with the drug-free communities funding that you need to have at the table, and there happens to be 12 months in a year. So what this coalition leader explained is, so they did a celebration of a sector a month. And so we have adopted that. And so each month we just randomly select another sector, but so we do it now, we rotate we have them kind of a pattern of what we do, but we have that sector that we celebrate that sector. And then we also talk about who else from that sector may need to be at our table, or do we need to look at bringing to the table. It's 5-10 minutes at the max as a piece of our coalition meeting, but it always is bringing new people and new members to the table. And then within that conversation, we are able to have that extended conversation to say, okay, so Kim Linkle, someone recommended that Kim Linkle needs to be at our table. Does anyone know Kim, or does anyone have any connections with Kim that they would be willing to either make that ask or that invite? Or, would you be willing to connect me as a coalition leader with that person? So just learn those connections. I know in the community I live in, it's a fairly small community, so many people are related somehow. So again, just by asking, at the coalition table, like, hey, I've been made aware that this person would make a great coalition member. Does anyone live near them? Does anyone, are any of their children friends with any of your, kids? And so just to really be able to figure out those connections and determine who makes the most logical person to reach out and to make that, ask of them to either sit at the table, whether it's, whatever that ask is, to, who makes that ask when it is needed. I also encourage everyone just to have patience. It takes time. It takes time to build relationships. It takes time to get people fully engaged. Coalition work is, it's something that doesn't happen quickly. It happens over time. I know that we are working on changing our park policy around vaping and smoking. And, I started the conversation last September. We were hoping to have it all with all new signage by the end of 2020. Here we are in April, and we're still working on finalizing the policy and getting final approval. And then, we'll have to put the signage up once it is approved. And again, things happen, life happens. Due to some bad weather that we had in our area over the winter, a couple meetings were canceled, so that got pushed back a month. So again, we just have to be patient and know that it takes time to get policies change to be able to implement strategies, because everything doesn't always go as quickly as we have. It should in our heads or even on paper as we have planned it out. And then finally, I think it's important to know what's in it for me. And I mean that actually almost the opposite way. So know what's in it for the person that you are reaching out to. Always think of coalition work as a give and take. Be able to share with them what their agency or their organization is going to get from coming to the table. And in addition to that, know what their expectations are of the coalition. Are they going to want to partner, I don't know, on a grant opportunity or a funding opportunity? Do they need some data? Because are they looking to add a program? So always look at bringing new coalition members on as kind of what's in it for me. One thing that I always share is, sometimes as a coalition leader, you will be out doing things that you're like, I don't really think this fits in my coalition, my coalition hat. However, if that's what a dedicated and engaged partner, agency, or group needs you to do that day, then maybe that's what you are doing, because ultimately you need them to be at the table in 2 weeks for maybe they're doing a presentation on a topic, or they're giving you their time and their expertise. So I think it's important, as coalition leaders, to just be flexible and be willing to always be looking at, what, like, if we're going to ask them to do this, what could we offer to them? And that wraps up this